Hello, everybody on the Riviera Network. Today we're going to start out with a little bit of Indian lore, sayings, some stories, and we'll go from there. Tell me, and I'll forget. Show me, I may not remember. Even now involve me, and I will understand. Tribe unknown. It is better to have less thunder in the mouth and more lightning in the hand. Apache. They are not dead who live in the hearts they leave behind. Tuscarora. All plants are our brothers and sisters. They talk to us, and if we listen, we can hear them. Arapaho. A brave man dies but once, a coward many times. Iowa. When we show our respect for other living things, they respond with respect to us. Arapaho. If we wonder often, the gift of knowledge will come. Arapaho. As long as the moon shall rise, as long as the rivers flow, as long as the sun will shine, as long as the grass shall grow. The Senecas are an Indian tribe of the Iroquois nations, down on the New York-Pennsylvania line. You'll find their reservation. After the U.S. Revolution, Corn Planter was the chief. He told his tribe, "These men you can trust." That was his true belief. He went down to Independence Hall, and there a treaty signed that promised peace with the USA and Indian rights combined. George Washington gave his signature. The government gave its hand. They said that now and forevermore, this was Indian land. As long as the moon shall rise, as long as the rivers flow, as long as the sun will shine, as long as the grass shall grow. On the Seneca Reservation, there is much sadness now. Washington's treaty has been broken. There is no hope, no how. Across the Allegheny River, they're throwing up a dam. It will flood the Indian country. A proud day for Uncle Sam. It has broke the ancient treaty with a politician's grin. Will drown the Indian graveyards. Corn Planter, can you swim? The earth is mother to the Senecas. They're trampling sacred grounds, changing the mint green earth to black mud flats as honor hobbles down. As long as the moon shall rise, as long as the rivers flow, as long as the sun will shine, as long as the grass shall grow. The Iroquois Indians used to rule from Canada way south, but no one fears the Indians now and smiles a liar's mouth. The Senecas hired an expert to figure another site, but the great good Army engineers said he had no right. Although he showed them another plan and showed them another way, they laughed in his face and said, "No deal. Kinzua Dam is here to stay." Congress turned the Indians down, brushed off the Indians' plea, so the Senecas have renamed the dam. They call it Lake Perfidy. As long as the moon shall rise, as long as the rivers flow, as long as the sun will shine, as long as the grass shall grow. Washington, Adams, and Kennedy, hear their promise plea. The treaties are safe. We'll keep our word, but what is that gurgling? It's the backwater from Perfidy Lake, rising all the time, over the homes and over the fields and over the promises vine. No boats will sail on Lake Perfidy. In winter it will fill. In summer it will be a swamp and all the fish is killed. But the government of the USA has corrected George's vow. The father of our country must be wrong. We're Indians anyhow. As long as the moon shall rise, look up. As long as the rivers flow, my brother, are you warm? As long as the sun will shine, as long as the grass shall grow. This next little story is called Apache Tears. Hoof prints and footprints, deep ruts the wagons made. The victor and the loser came by here. No headstones, but these bones bring Mescaleros' dead moans. See the smooth black nuggets by the thousands lying here, petrified but justified are these Apache tears. Dead grass, dry roots, hunger crying in the night, ghosts of broken hearts and laws are here. And who saw the young squaw they judged by their whiskey laws, tortured till she died of pain and fear? Where the soldiers lay her back are the black Apache tears. The young men, the old men, the guilty and the innocent bled red blood and chilled alike with fear. The red men, the white men, no fight ever took this land, so don't raise the dust when you pass here. We're sleeping, and in my keeping are these Apache tears. Beware of the man who does not talk, and the dog that does not bark. Cheyenne. Don't be afraid to cry. It will free your mind of sorrowful thoughts. Hopi. Our next little story is called The Talking Leaves. Sequoia's winters were 16, silent-tongued, spirit clean. He walked at his father's side. Across the smoking battleground, where red and white men lay all around, so many here had died. The wind had scattered around snow-white leaves upon the ground, not leaves like leaves from trees. And seeing these things, Sequoia said, "What can this be? What's these strange things I hear? So strange, these snow-white leaves." Sequoia looked into his father's eyes, and he said, "Father, you are wise. From where come such snow-white leaves, with such strange marks upon these squares? Not even the wise owl can put them there. So strange, these snow-white leaves." His father, shielding his concern, resenting the knowledge Sequoia yearned, crumbled the snow-white leaf. He said, "When I explain, that's done. For these are talking leaves, my son, the white man's talking leaves. The white man, he takes a berry in black and red, and an eagle's feather from the eagle's nest, and he makes bird track marks. And the marks on the leaves, they say, carry messages to his brother far away, and his brother knows what's in his heart. They see these marks and they understand the truth in the heart of the far-off man, but their enemies cannot hear them." Said Sequoia's father, "Son, they weave bad medicine on these talking leaves. Leave such things to them." Sequoia, walking lightly, followed his father quietly, but so amazed was he. If the white men talk sun leaves, why not the Cherokee? Vanished from his father's face, Sequoia went from place to place, but he could not forget. Year after year, he worked on and on, until finally he cut into stone the Cherokee alphabet. Sequoia's hair by now was white, and his eyes began to lose their light. But he taught all who would believe that the Indians' thoughts could be written down, just as the white man's there on the ground. And he left us these talking leaves. Most of us do not look as handsome to others as we do to ourselves. You can't wake a person who is pretending to be asleep. Navajo. When you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life so when you die, the world cries, and you rejoice. Cherokee. Those who have 1 foot in a canoe and 1 foot in a boat will fall into the river. Tuscarora. The weakness of the enemy makes our strength. Cherokee. When the white men discovered this country, Indians were running it. No taxes, no debt. Women did all the work. White men thought they could improve on this system. Cherokee. Another little verse written by a man I've met 3 times, talked to him twice in Korea and once in this country. This is entitled Old Doc Brown. He was just an old country doctor in a little country town. Fame and fortune had passed him by, though we never saw him frown. As day by day, in his kindly way, he'd serve us one and all. Many a patient forgot to pay, though Doc's fees were small. Though he needed his dimes, and there were times he'd receive a fee, he'd pass it on to some poor soul that needed it worse than he. He had to sell his furniture. He couldn't pay his office rent. So to a dusty room over a livery stable, Doc Brown and his satchel went. And on a hitching post at the curb below to advertise his wares, he nailed a little sign that read, Doc Brown has moved upstairs. There he kept on helping folks get well, for his heart was just pure gold. But anyone with eyes could tell, old Doc was getting old. Then one day he didn't answer when he knocked upon his door. Old Doc Brown was lying down, but his soul was no more. They found him there in his old black suit, and on his face was a smile of content. But all the money they could find on him was a quarter and a copper cent. So they opened up his ledger, and what they saw gave their hearts a pull. Beside each debtor's name, old Doc had written these words, paid in full. Old Doc should have had a funeral fine enough for a king. It's a ghastly joke our town was broke, and no one could get a thing. Except Jones, an undertaker, he did mighty well, donating an old iron casket he'd never been able to sell. In the funeral procession, it wasn't much for space and style, but those wagon loads of mourners, they stretched out for more than a mile. We wanted to give him a monument. We kind of figured we owed him one, because he made our town a better place for all the good that he had done. We pulled up that old hitching post where Doc had nailed his sign. We painted it white, and to all of us, it sure did look fine. Now the rains and the snows have washed away our white trimmings of paint. There ain't nothing left but Doc's own sign, and that's getting mighty faint. But you can still see that old hitching post, as if in answer to our prayers, mutely telling the whole wide world, Doc Brown has moved upstairs. A story we all have heard before, but this is my version of the Trojan horse. Many, many years ago, the brave armies of Greece and Troy were locked in a long, bitter war. The Trojans had captured a beautiful Greek princess named Helen and held her within their fortress city of Troy. It did not seem possible that any man could break the towering walls of Troy. For days, weeks, months, the Greek soldiers from their camps on the beach near the city assaulted the walls of Troy, but they were always beaten back. Then one day, Odysseus, a great leader of the Greeks, said to his men, I have a plan. It is dangerous, but if it works, the Trojans themselves will lead us through the gates of their city. At the order of Odysseus, the Greek soldiers began cutting down huge trees and making wood into planks. And from the towering walls of Troy, the Trojans watched a building grow taller and taller until it was 6 stories high. And when the Greek soldiers pulled away all the work ladders and scaffolds, there stood a huge wooden horse, 80 feet tall. The people of Troy lined up along the walls of their city to to look at this strange wooden animal. They wondered what it meant, what it was for. But what the Trojans did not know was that Odysseus and 5 Greek soldiers had quietly hidden in a dark, secret passage inside the wooden horse. All that night, fire blazed brightly on the beach. The Greeks were burning their tents, just as if they was giving up camp and sailing back home. And when morning arrived, not a Greek ship nor soldier remained, but where they had camped stood this great wooden horse. The people of Troy flowed out of the city to look more closely at this great wooden animal. Some thought it would make a great monument to their victory over the Greeks. But the Princess Cassandra, daughter of the king of the Trojans, warned her people of this great gift, but no one would listen. Thick ropes were tied around the legs of this great wooden animal. Hundreds of men took a hand at the ropes. Others lined up behind, laughing and hollering, joking at the Greeks who were never able to scale the towering walls of Troy. The Trojans tugged and pushed and pulled slowly across the plains and through the gates of Troy. Inside the horse, Odysseus and his men could feel the horse being moved. And what the Trojans had decided to do, neither Odysseus nor his men knew. Suddenly, after a whole day and half a night, the horse moved no more. A day passed. Still, it did not move. The 5 Greek soldiers felt their way quietly along the dark secret passage, following Odysseus. Cautiously, he opened the trap door. Just as he had hoped, the Trojan had pulled the great wooden horse inside the walls and into the city of Troy itself. It was midnight. The city was sleeping, and the walls were unguarded. Odysseus gave the signal, and he ordered his men to follow, and he dashed for the main gates of the city. The Greek soldiers tied the sleeping old Trojan guards, while Odysseus scampered up the sentry tower. Holding a torch high above his head, he signaled to the Greek army, which had turned around and sailed back during the night. And while Odysseus and his 5 soldiers were opening up the gates of the city, the Greek army was marching across the plain. Caught completely by surprise, the Trojans were easily defeated, and the Greeks, they found their beautiful princess and took her safely home. And Odysseus was named the greatest of the Greek heroes. When a man moves away from nature, his heart becomes hard. Lakota. We will be known forever by the tracks we leave. Dakota. Do not judge your neighbor until you walk 2 moons in his moccasins. Cheyenne. There is nothing as eloquent as a rattlesnake's tail. Navajo. Force, no matter how concealed, begets resistance. Lakota. Our first teacher is our own heart. Cheyenne. And you've heard this before. This is another favorite of mine, written by my friend Johnny Cash. The Ragged Old Flag. It's good for this weekend coming up July 4th. I walked through a county courthouse square. On a park bench, an old man was sitting there. I said, "Your courthouse is kind of run down." He said, "Nah, that'll do for our little town." I said, "Your flagpole's leaned a little bit. That's a ragged old flag you got hanging on it." He said, "Have a seat." So I sat down. "Is this the first time you've been to our little town?" I said, "I think it is." He said, "Well, I don't like to brag, but I'm kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, we got a little hole in that flag there when Washington took it across the Delaware. She got powder burns the night Francis Scott Key sat writing, 'Say, can you see?' She got a bad rip in New Orleans with Pakenham and Jackson tugging at her seams. She almost fell at the Alamo beside the Texas flag, but she waved on, though. She got cut with a sword in Chancellorsville. She got cut again at Shiloh Hill. There was Robert E. Lee, Beauregard, and Bragg. The south wind blew hard on that ragged old flag. On Flanders Field in World War I, she got a big hole from a Bertha gun. She turned blood red in World War II. She hung limp and low a time or two. She was in Korea, Vietnam. She went where she was sent by her Uncle Sam. She waved on ships upon the briny foam, but they've about quit waving her back here at home. In her own good land here, she's been abused. She's been burned. She's been denied, dishonored, and refused. And the government for which she stands is scandalized throughout the land. She's getting threadbare, and she's wearing thin. But she's in good shape for the shape she's in, because she's been through the fire before. And I believe she can take a whole lot more. So we raise her up every morning. We take her down every night. We don't let her touch the ground. And we fold her upright. On second thought, I do like to brag, because I'm mighty proud of that ragged old flag. Everyone who is successful must have dreamed of something. Maricopa. All who have died are equal. Cheyenne. What the people believe is true. Comanche. What is life? It is the flash of a firefly in the night. It is the breath of a buffalo in wintertime. It is the little shadow which runs across the grass and loses itself in the sunset. Blackfoot. If a man is as wise as a serpent, he can afford to be harmless as a dove. Cheyenne. I'd sing more about more of this land, but all God's children ain't free. I'd open every door I can, because all God's children ain't free. I met a beaten, broken man. He shovels dirt, but he's got no land. And he held out his hand to me. All God's children ain't free. I sing along to a silly song, but all God's children ain't free. I'm gonna sing the blues for the man they done wrong, 'cause all God's children ain't free. Mister, how about the man we condemned to die by taking everything that he's living by and reject him from society? All God's children ain't free. I'd be happy walking any street, but all God's children ain't free. I'd have a smile for all I'd meet, but all God's children ain't free. I'd whistle down the road, but I wouldn't feel right, 'cause I'd hear somebody crying out at night from a sharecropper shack or penitentiary. All God's children ain't free. I'm going to take a little change of pace. Let there be more laughter. Kind of cool stuff here. Marriage is like a roller coaster ride. 1 minute you're up, the next you're down. It's fun, exhilarating, and terrifying. It's the ride of your life, a real white-knuckle event filled with joy and commitment. This is written by a lady. For a middle-aged mother of 4, this is an adventure. I'm on a plane that just took off from the Dallas-Fort Worth, heading to a remote island in the Caribbean. Scott is beside me, dressed in his khaki shorts, a Hawaiian shirt, a Tevel sandals, topped off with an Aussie Outback style leather hat. Oh, and he also brought his fishing pole aboard. Typical of my husband, he is fully into anything smacking of outdoors, men's thrills, lock, stock, and rod and reel. He's intensely absorbed in an issue of Dive magazine, occasionally stopping to show me a picture of tropical fishes, excited as a boy let out of school. He plans to become Scott Cousteau by week's end. I can tell that. I am seeing glimpses again of the boy I fell in love with when I was a young girl of 15. After nearly a quarter century of babies, teens, bills, and jobs, it's easy to forget that my husband is not just a father to our kids and payer of bills, but also he's my very best friend. Our marriage needs a chance to remember that again. How long has it been since we embarked on a getaway, spent a few days just playing together? We are en route to a small island in the Caymans because of a kind-hearted, soft-spoken woman named Mary Brandis, whose family owns much of the property on Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. Much of the property on Cayman Brac and Little Cayman asked me to speak at a women's retreat. She's calling it Barefoot and Breaking Free, and is putting on this event as a gift to herself and to her friends after what has been a very, very tough year. She's ready to run free in the sand again, abandon herself to her Lord anew. Mary has invited between 50 and 75 American women and the same number of islanders to the Black Reef Resort she owns and manages. Scott, usually reluctant to accompany me to ladies' things, took no time in offering himself as companion and bag carrier to sacrifice for Jesus in the Caymans. Yesterday, Mary called me at home from the resort as I was frantically searching for birth certificates to get Scott and me safely across the border. I found Scott's, I told her, but mine seems to be missing. But hey, here's a marriage license. I'll toss that in just in case I can piggyback on his birth certificate by virtue of being legally married to him. Why don't you just keep looking for that birth certificate, Mary said with a laugh. Minutes later, I hung up the phone and Viola found my birth certificate. Now we could prove I have been born without having to drag my mother to the airport and make her show her stretch marks. Relief. But a funny thing happened today as we stood at the airline counter to purchase our tickets. May I see your birth certificates? The attendant said. Sure, I said, handing her the documents. Pardon me, she countered, directing her comments to Scott. But this birth certificate does not match your driver's license. It says Ezekiel Scott Freeman. Are you Ezekiel? No, Scott said, panic showing in his bulging eyes. That would be my son. Then he turned to me. Honey, didn't you say not to worry? That you had my birth certificate? I knew he was contemplating the scenario of his being left behind a 105-degree day in Texas, waving to me as I took off alone for cool island breezes. I looked at the lady helplessly. I must have accidentally grabbed my son's birth certificate instead of my husband's. With palms up, I shrugged toward Scott, who was now holding his head in his hands, and cheerfully added, whoops, it did not help. A young man approached the counter to try to help. Do you, by any chance, have your marriage license with you? He asked. Scott rolled his eyes and started to say, fat chance, as I produced the needed document with the flourish of a magician. Indeed, he looked at me as if I'd just pulled a live rabbit out of my tote bag. Since I enjoy saying a bit of a mystery to my husband, the only explanation I offered was a wide grin. Well, we've all heard jokes about island time, so perhaps Scott and I should not be surprised that the pilot just announced midair that our connecting flight to Grand Cayman, to Cayman Brac, will be a bit delayed. He estimates about a 4-hour wait. I looked at Scott and pointed to the Cayman area insignia on the leaf in front of us. Well, what can we expect from an airline whose symbol is just a peg-legged turtle? He laughs and we snuggled like sleepy kids, my head on his lap, as we wait for the landing and the next plane that will take us to paradise. Marriage is like twirling a baton, turning handsprings, or eating with chopsticks. It looks easy until you try it. Two can live as cheaply as one, but only half as long. 4-year-old Susie had just been told the story of Snow White for the first time in her life. She could hardly wait to get home from nursery school to tell her mommy. With wide-eyed excitement, she retold the fairy tale to her mother that afternoon. After relating how Prince Charming had arrived on his beautiful white horse and kissed Snow White back to life, Susie asked loudly, "And do you know what happened then?" "Yes," her mom said. They lived happily ever after. Yes, responded Susie with a warm frown. They got married. I know love is blind, but does it have to be deaf and dumb also? The best man was missing. The Baptist minister allowed them to hold up the wedding a few minutes, waiting for him, but soon resumed the ceremony routine. When he asked for the ring, the errant best man popped up from the baptismal pool, snorkel and all. Water dripped and his fingers flapped across the water dripped from his flippers and across the charred floor as he unzipped his wetsuit and handed over the ring. This little story is called Husbands. A husband shopping center was opened where a woman could choose a husband from a wide selection of men. It was laid out on 5 floors, with the men increasing in positive attributes as you screened the floors. The only rules were that once you opened the door to any floor, you had to choose a man from that floor. And if you went up a floor, you couldn't go back down except to leave the plane. So a couple of girlfriends go to the shopping center to find a husband. First floor, the door has a sign saying, "These men have jobs and love kids." The woman read the sign and said, "Well, that's better than not having jobs or not loving kids." She said, "That's better than what's further up." And up they go. Second floor, these men have high-paying jobs, love kids, and are extremely good looking. Say the girls. You almost ready? Third floor, these men have high-paying jobs, are extremely good looking, love kids, and help with the housework. Wow, say the women. Very tempting, but there's more further up. And so again, up they go. Fourth floor, these men have high-paying jobs, love kids, are extremely good looking, help with the housework, and have strong romantic streak. Wow, they explain. Just think what must be waiting for us further up. So up to the 5th floor they go. The sign on the door says, "This is just to prove that women are impossible to please. Thank you for shopping and have a nice day." I have some good friends who have been married many years. The wife calls the husband me. Out of curiosity one day, I asked her why. She said, "We are one flesh, which means I am him." Yeah,